Okay, so here's the next problem. I've got it machine turned on, hit the start button. So the ball's out. I'm going to add another player. Okay, so I got 2 players up there right now. I'm just going to take the ball and score a couple points and then drain. Ball kicks out, but it's still on player 1. That didn't change. And if I do it again, watch that player indicator up there, that little 1 up there. I'm going to drain the ball. It stays on player 1 forever. So that's our problem. What is it? Incidentally, there is a secondary problem that is the symptoms being exhibited here. If I take the ball and I'll just knock a drop target down and I'll drain the ball, kicks the ball out, but you notice it didn't reset the drop targets. So that actually there are 2 symptoms here. One is the player does not increase, it just stays on player 1 all the time. And then as you knock these drop targets down, they don't reset when the ball lands, which should happen. So, secondary problem. Okay, so here's the problem. This is the underside of the playfield. I've got it propped open right now, and you can see my little nasty wedge of paper there was blocking open the trough switch. This is a switch with a wire that goes from the out hole to the runway. There's a trough switch that has to be actuated, and it was blocked open. So let's walk through this schematic. On the schematic around section E-19, you'll find the trough switch. And the trough switch, when it closes, when the ball leaves the out hole headed to the runway, it will close that switch momentarily. And the P relay is called the add player unit relay. So all the switches close, we get circuit, we energize the P relay. There are 4 contacts on that P relay. The first contact is going to be the hold switch. So the relay closes this switch, which keeps the circuit in place. Pretty straightforward. So we actually looked at the player unit before, and I added over here, I didn't have it on here before, the P switch. And you may need to go back and look at a previous episode, but the coin unit kind of works as each player finishes. There has to be a circuit closed so that it knows to advance to the next player. And if that circuit does not close, it won't move to the next player. So by having this switch permanently open, there's no way that any of the other player circuits, 1, 2, 3, or 4, any of them can close to advance the player unit past player 1. But that doesn't explain the drop targets. So if you look at the drop targets, this is the motor, score motor. I've shown this before, all the different switches that can trigger the score motor, and there's P, which would be the third P relay switch. It's going to close while the score motor runs. And then the 4th P relay switch, is down around the sequence resets. Now, one thing that was interesting, since I blocked the trough open, the P relay would never energize, but the target banks would reset when I turn the machine on, and that's because the S relay also has a parallel, see how these are actually connected, has a parallel switch, so when you start up the machine, it's actually going to close the S relay switch, and then as the score motor increments, it's going to close 3B and 2C to reset everything. And then when the player 1 ended, since the trough switch was never allowed to close, the P relay was never allowed to energize, this switch never closed, and S is only at startup. So what happened was the target banks could not, either 1776 or 1976, could not reset because this P switch was always open. And I didn't notice it, but I'm guessing that the rollovers, if we would have triggered some rollovers, the star rollovers would have stayed lit because we could never reset the sequence bank either. So to recap, trough switch enables the P relay. P relay has 4 contacts. One is a self-locking switch to keep the P relay locked. One is to trigger the score motor. One is to allow the player unit to increment. And the last one is to reset the target banks in the sequence bank relay.